This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
It is so nice to be preceded on this show by incoming U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro. It is wonderful, the appointment that was made and the job that she'll do. She is basically now appointed to be the DA for Washington, D.C. They call it U.S. Attorney because D.C. is under federal control. But it's an amazing promotion. And it means that everybody who commits any crime in Washington, D.C., including corruption, is subject to prosecution, and Jeanine Pirro is on the other table. And you can't ask for a better attorney, you can't ask for a better prosecutor, and it's such an honor to have Jeanine taken away from this show, I guess, ultimately, and given this incredible, wonderful power.
Hello, Dick. I'm sorry it took so long to get on the air.
Happy Mother's Day, Doug.
Yeah, that's a half a word.
Happy Mother's Day, everybody.
Happy Mother's Day to my mother, Gloria.
And to my mother, who is long gone. My mom taught me how to write, and my dad taught me how to talk. So between them, they made a complete political pundit.
Yeah. My mother taught me. We were on the East Side Highway. I was probably 17, 18, I was driving into the city with her. And back then, and as you know, I always drive in, right, Dick? And back then, we were in traffic at, who knows, 76th Street or something. I go, son of a traffic. My mother goes, Douglas, you're in Manhattan. You're going to be in traffic. And from then on, I don't get upset in traffic. Thank you, Ma.
I had a busy weekend. On Friday and yesterday, I had long conversations with President Trump by phone, and they were very important, and they're related to the federal budget issues. And I'm very experienced in that because I worked with Clinton during the budget negotiations with Gingrich and Lott that led to the balanced budget for 4 years. And the Friday conversation related to the proposals to increase the top bracket of the income tax. And he referred to it as a tiny increase. And I said, not so tiny. We know with the earned income tax, with the alternative minimum tax, called the ATM, becomes an AMT. and what happens is that more and more people are in that bracket, and it ultimately becomes a universal high tax. And I also emphasized to him, which he already knew and said to me, that his campaign promise is not to raise taxes, and that he absolutely can't break that. He liked the idea of increasing taxes on the rich to help the poor, but he realized that you don't need to do it that way. The next day, Saturday, we had another discussion, which I'd like to share with you all today. We discussed the mechanics of how he can get his tax decreases, his tax cuts, approved by Congress, and the tax cuts of 17 continued in perpetuity. And the key to that lies in the way the Congress counts the money in the budgeting process. House Republicans are squeezing Trump in negotiations over the reconciliation budget package. Some have even suggested that tax increases might be necessary to pay for his budget request. But Trump has proposed more than enough new revenue to offset any needed reductions and to obviate the need for any new taxes. It's just that the sources of revenue he's contemplating aren't being counted as the House grapples with the budget. Why not? Likely because they're new and creative, and the bureaucrats of the Congressional Budget Office are unused to such novel approaches. Let me digress and explain the Congressional Budget Office. In 1974, in the midst of Watergate, Congress realized that the president had too much power and they had too little power over the budget process. So they passed the Congressional Budget Act, and that was one of the most important acts in American history because it created the Congressional Budget Office, CBO, which was the congressional equivalent of OMB, the Office of Management and Budget, in the executive branch. And the idea was that Congress would have all the data, all the information, and all the arguments to argue from a position of equality with the executive branch in setting up the budget. It basically empowered Congress and gave them an independent arm to analyze what was happening in the budget. It was very important. And since then, the issue has always been how much are we increasing the deficit? How close are we getting to a balanced budget? How much is the debt increasing? And every time a new bill was filed or a new expenditure proposed, the Congressional Budget Office would score it and would say this will cost X amount this year and Y amount over 10 years. And every time a tax cut was proposed or a tax increase, they would also score it and explain the revenue consequences. So the scoring function of the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office became absolutely pivotal. And in budget negotiations, the question is the Budget Office scoring your budget as deficit neutral or as something that cuts the budget deficit? So when Trump proposed a $2 trillion of tax cuts, the question became how would the Congressional Budget Office, CBO, score it? And Trump came in and proposed all sorts of new revenue that he said would make these tax cuts affordable, and they will. For example, he's proposing a uniform base tariff of 10% on all countries that want to export to America. Such a tariff would bring in $400 billion a year in new revenue. Total U.S. imports to the U.S. run about $4 trillion a year, and a 10% tax would be $400 billion. With that money, the rest of the budget would balance easily. But the bean counters in the Congressional Budget Office haven't taken notice and do not include it in their budget projections.
Hold on one second, Dick. You mentioned this to him yesterday, didn't you?
We spent the whole call talking about it. Okay. And I said, why hasn't the Congressional Budget Office scored your tariffs as a revenue source? And he said to me, I'm going to be asking that exact same question in a couple hours later today. And he did. And they're going, I think they're going to be scored in the future. The House Republicans have also approved a plan to let Trump sell massive amounts of federal land in Utah and Nevada. But the bean counters in the Congressional Budget Office haven't factored that revenue into their projections. And when I spoke with Trump yesterday, I asked him, why not? And I said, I'm going to be asking them the same question. That's the second question I'll ask.
Right.
And I reminded him that when I worked with Bill Clinton, we were auctioning off frequencies to television stations, radio stations, and cell phone operators, and that we factored the revenue we would get from those sales into our budget projections. So we should factor in the revenue we'll get from selling a massive amount of federal land in Utah and Nevada. Those sales, by the way, are very important because they will have major mineral rights, and the mining can be very important to our economy and to being independent of China. But it largely will have no environmental impact. Biden went wild, as did Obama, in putting every blade of grass they could find into federal land. And now the federal government owns 70 to 80% of the land in Nevada and Utah. It doesn't need to protect the environment with 10 or 20%, and that extra land could be sold off, auctioned off, and has oil, gas, rare earth minerals, and all kinds of good stuff. So Trump is ordering that to happen, and will, but the revenue that's going to generate is not included in the Congressional Budget Office projections. So then I said, finally, the bean counters and the CBO have not even begun to come to grips with Trump's drug pricing reforms. Those specify, he's announcing those tomorrow, and he was very enthusiastic about it on the phone yesterday in explaining them. They basically say that Medicare and Medicaid can pay no more for a drug than the lowest amount charged in any of the 10 major Western economies of the world.
Wait, say that again. One more time.
Medicare and Medicaid, and by the way, you personally, when you pick up your prescription drug, cannot be charged more than that drug gets in any of the 10 major Western economies of the world. So if Britain is able to get that drug for $10, you can't be charged more than $10, even if you're now charged
So the
$20.
lowest common denominator?
Not the lowest
The lowest price out of all those countries
becomes the mandatory price.
Wow, beautiful.
So you go through 10 countries and you say, how much do they pay? And that's how much you can pay, and they have to go down to that level. And Trump told me over the phone, he said, this is tremendously important. It'll lower drug prices in half around the country. But nobody had the guts to do this before. It's been proposed before, but
by the lobbyists or the
drug companies
lobbyists guys.
Yeah,
sure.
And they, because this comes right out of their profits.
Sure.
And Trump had the guts to do it, and he just did it. And he's going to announce it on Monday, and that's cool.
There goes a lot of vacations and roofs on houses and things that they give you, the lobbyists.
But the problem is that the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, wasn't listening to the president and didn't score that new revenue in their budget. So they came to the House and they said, hey guys, you have to raise taxes, or you have to cut Medicaid, or all kinds of stuff, which they don't have to do if they count those revenues. The impact of Trump's, they call this the most favored nation drug pricing reform. On healthcare costs, the government must pay is certain to be huge, but no allowance for it is included in the scoring that lays the basis for the negotiations on the budget. It's time for the folks at the Congressional Budget Office to wake up and pay attention to what the president says. There's no way income taxes need to be raised when these new revenue streams are included. And there's no way the House Republicans need to cut Medicaid benefits beyond eliminating waste and fraud. Let's get real, people. So when I said that to the president, he said, those are the three questions I'm going to ask in a few minutes at the meeting. Why the tariff is not scored, why the land sales are not scored, and why my drug pricing reform is not scored and not included in the budget talks.
And I want to say this. I'm on a lot of the calls with Dick and the president, and most of the time, the president will say, all right, Dick, that sounds great. I love it. Or he'll just say, okay, I got it. We'll see. And he almost never says, you know what? I like that idea. I'm going to check it out. I'm going to ask that question. It's almost never. For 4 years, I've been hearing these conversations. And the last couple of conversations, he said to Dick, I'm going to ask that. Oh, that's great. You got it. What else you got, Dick? Like, he really is pulling you in. I think maybe he's just doing to show you how much he cares about what you. No, serious. How much he loves you.
No,
I love you all of my heart.
He's celebrating Mother's Day.
Even mother.
Yeah.
I love you with all of my heart.
But so this is really a game changer. And if you listen to the news on WABC a few minutes ago, before the show came on, they announced that Trump will propose the additional tax cuts on Monday. And these are the other elements that will be included in the package. We'll talk about this when we get back, because there's more I got to share with you guys.
Good.
This National Foster Care Month, Marine Toys for Tots is providing hope to children who need it most. Staff Sergeant James Caldwell, who grew up in foster care himself, shares that while handing out gifts at a Toys for Tots distribution event, a little girl looked up at him, reached into her bag, pulled out a stuffed animal and said, "Someone needs to make sure you get a toy too." That simple gesture embodies the heart of Marine Toys for Tots, ensuring every child, including those in foster care, experiences the kindness that can transform their future. Visit toysfortots.org today.
Welcome to the Dick Morris and Doug Depierro Show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group.
Hello, Dick.
The thing that was driving me crazy that led to my call to Trump yesterday is the House Ways and Means Committee came out with their version of Trump's budget and did not include provisions on state and local tax deduction caps, which is perhaps the most controversial of the laws under consideration.
That would be state and local tax SALT.
SALT, S-A-L-T.
All right.
The SALT cap is a popular deduction in many higher tax blue states, as emerged as one of the big sticking points in the negotiations. Before Trump took office, you could not deduct your state, and you could deduct all your state and local taxes on your federal income tax. And then when Trump came in, he cut that out. He said you can't deduct that stuff because he said there's no reason why the rest of the country should subsidize New York, New Jersey, and California that have these very high income and property taxes. And that passed. And in the last couple of years, the wealthy taxpayers have not been able to deduct the interest on their mortgages or their credit cards or other sources of interest. And that's been a big, big problem for them. So the House members, the House Republicans, got together and told Trump, you have to change that. And Trump said, okay, what I'll do is I'll cap it. I'll say that you can deduct it, but only up to a certain amount. I think now the amount is $10,000, and the speculation was it would be raised to $100,000. But those cuts were not included in the budget. The House committee just reported out. And missing also are the individual tax breaks that Trump promised on the campaign trail, including getting rid of the tax on tips and overtime and canceling taxes on Social Security and adding a tax break for auto loan interest for cars purchased in the United States. Those are all part of Trump's program, but they were nowhere to be seen in the budget. So when I called him, I said, you're going to go ahead with those tax cuts. You have to. You proposed them. He said, of course I am. We just have what came out with today was half a budget. Next week you'll see the other half of the budget, and all that stuff will be included. Then the conversation proceeded to how do you pay for it? How do we get the CBO to let you do it without saying it's going to increase the deficit? Because it's not. In fact, it's going to decrease the deficit by a lot and set us on the path not just to a balanced budget like Bill Clinton did, but actually to reducing the federal debt significantly. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about $400 billion of money that's going to come in from this tariff. And that's not the tariff on China and the tariff on Europe and Mexico and Canada. This is a universal 10% tariff that Trump is imposing on everybody, every country that imports to the United States. And they sell us $4 trillion worth of imports every year.
So do the math.
So if we get a 10% tax on that, that's $400 billion. Wow. And Americans aren't going to have to pay it. Some eventually will be, because some will be included in higher prices, but not much. And it's paid in the tariffs. It's basically permission to access the U.S. market. That is very valuable. It's the only one of its kind in the world. And Trump is charging an entry fee of a tariff of 10%. And like even the discussions with Britain that have matured, the 10% tariff is in there. And he's not going to take it out for anybody. So score that. Take that money and use it so you don't have to cut Medicaid and you don't have to raise taxes on anybody. And that's the key thing. Now, it's Mother's Day, as everybody knows. And I want to go back to something that I proposed to President Trump during the campaign, and he embraced enthusiastically. I called it at the time the motherhood agenda. And he has already gone public with one key aspect of it, which is the idea of giving every woman $1,000 when they give birth if they are married, and $1,000 per birth. And the idea is that this will create an alternative to abortion that was well funded. Have the baby and we'll pay you $1,000. And I think the key is you have to be married. So we're not subsidizing illegitimate births, and we're not subsidizing unwed motherhood. this, I think, will cause a huge change in the marriage agenda in the country. Women who say, what's the point in getting married, or I don't want to get married, are going to say, I'm going to get married to the baby's father because I want $1,000. And it'll create a real incentive for a good public policy. Economists have explained for many years that the number one cause of poverty in the United States is the lack of marriage, is single-headed, female-headed households with kids without a father. And something like 70% of the births in the U.S. today are to single mothers. And this would roll that back, because who is not going to get married to be able to take the $1,000? And then I think Trump is going to add to this agenda, we're calling it the motherhood agenda, in the next few months, to extend child care, respite care, saying we'll help pay for someone to take care of the child when you can't be there, and extra food stamps for mothers and children in newborn situations. We have to change the pro-life movement. So it's not just a question of don't have an abortion and then rot a ruck, you're on your own. But instead, don't have an abortion, have the baby. We need more children, and we're going to help you do it. We're going to subsidize it. And this is a radical concept and a very important one, and one that not only helps poor people, but subsidizes family values. It encourages
That's what
marriage.
I like about it. That's what I like about it.
Absolutely. So it looks like the motherhood agenda is going to go ahead. But we got to get all this stuff into the budget. And the budget's this week is going to be announced with all this stuff in it. And we have to pay for it because the Congressional Budget Office will be very mad at us if we don't. And to do that, we need to count the money from the tariff, from the land sales, and from the drug pricing reform that Trump is proposing. So that was the conversations over the weekend, and I was very honored and glad to be able to do that.
And he liked the stuff also.
He loved it.
He loved it.
He was writing it down as we talked, and it was great.
It was very different. It was very different. His attitude towards you was beautiful. Anyway, you want to talk about Cuba?
Yep, absolutely.
So they call for the return of terrorists to U.S. from Cuba. On Friday, May 2nd, in 1973, New Jersey State Trooper Werner Forster approached a car that had been pulled over by police for a broken taillight in Jersey. Inside were 3 armed members of the Radical Black Liberation Army. Gunfire erupted, and in the shootout, Officer Forster was hit 4 times and was killed. Horrible. Now, decades later, the officer's cold-blooded executioner is spurring new calls for justice. No, execution is spurring new calls for justice. One of the militants in the car, Joanne Chesmard, has lived a life on the lam. In 1979, she escaped from a Jersey prison, and in the decade since, she has been living freely in Cuba. She should be serving a life sentence as the current head of the state police, New Jersey State Police Superintendent, Colonel Patrick Callahan. I want her yesterday, and I have Trooper Forrester's handcuffs ready to go on her when she lands on that tarmac, wherever she is. I like that. He actually has the guy's handcuffs he's going to handcuff her with. There are new calls to extradite her and the estimated 70 fugitives from the U.S. justice, including convicted murderers, airline hijackers, and others who continue to enjoy safe haven in Cuba. Trump has called on the Cuban regime to cough up Chesmar and the others.
I'd like to make a shout-out now to Joe Connor, whose father was killed by a terrorist, and has been pressing for justice to be brought against Joanne Chesmard. And he's been in touch with me over the last 40 years, really, to promote this cause. And it looks like now we're finally going to get justice.
Oh, that's great. That's so good. Things are getting done, thank God.
Now, one of the big changes, we had some thoughts, I think, from the Beatles about what should happen with Chesimard, who once belonged as jail.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, yesterday was a really historic day, and so interesting that it occurred around Mother's Day. Governor Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas, signed a school voucher law for the state of Texas. It's an amazing bill, and it's really historic in terms of changing public education in America. So the Beach Boys had a thought about that. A milestone for school choice supporters nationally. Texas will implement a $1 billion school voucher program, one of the largest in the country, that uses public dollars to fund private school tuition under a bill Governor Abbott signed Saturday, capping off a year-long effort, really decade-long effort, by Republicans. School voucher supporters have long targeted Texas, where past efforts buckled for decades against resistance from Democrats and rural Republicans. Last month, President Trump called lawmakers before a key vote, personally over the phone, to get their support to get the bill on Abbott's desk. Texas joins more than 30 other states that have implemented a similar program, of which about a dozen have launched or expanded their programs in the last year or two to make most students eligible. School vouchers have been Abbott's primary focus this year, coming off a 24 election cycle in which he led a campaign to oust Republican members who voted against a similar bill last session. That took such guts to actually come out and say, don't vote for the Republican candidate here because he's controlled by the teachers union and will not support school choice.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
Republicans and lawmakers said the bill's supporters they will give parents more choice by letting them pull their children out of poor-performing public schools. Abbott said gone are the days that families are limited only to the schools assigned by the government. The days arrived that empowers parents to choose the school that's best for their child. Republicans in rural districts have criticized the program, saying will drain financial resources from public school students. But they're not getting an education where they are. The schools are bad where they are, and this gives parents an opportunity for choice. Now, this isn't a mandatory reallocation of money. It means that the parents can individually choose where their child goes to school, and the state funding will follow the child from the public school to the private school, the church school, the parochial school, or the homeschooling that the mother and the child designate. Beginning next year, Texas families can receive $10,000 per year to help pay for students' private school tuition. Children with disabilities can qualify for as much as $30,000 a year. The program will be capped at $1 billion for the first year and will cover up to 90,000 students, but could cost $4.5 billion a year by 2030. This is such a major change, and it's crucial for public education. I once was talking to a woman who was one of the leaders in this effort in Washington, D.C., and I said, well, a black woman, and I said, why are you so hot about this? And she said, I was one of the original 9 girls who integrated the Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. And to escort us into school, President Eisenhower sent in the 82nd Airborne Division to make sure there were no riots and we could get into school in Little Rock. And she said, and this is the civil rights issue of our time. It isn't just integration, it's quality education. And the teachers union has stopped black children and poor children from getting a good education because they limit all kinds of programs. They don't allow extra time for teachers to work. They permit graduation and promotion of students who aren't qualified. And we have to end all of that. And the only way to do that is to have private and charter schools take over. I mean, why in the city of Philadelphia, for example, are there 100,000 children whose parents do not want them to go to the school they're supposed to go to, but want to go to a charter school instead, and they're waiting for openings in those schools? while the state legislatures in New York and Connecticut and New Jersey refuse to approve additional charter schools. So there's a backlog, and they're condemning to millions of children to a totally inadequate education, only to fund the teachers' union.
I was just going to, that's why I tapped you. I was going to ask you that.
Yeah.
This is about the teachers' union and
With
their
teachers' union,
power grab.
Yeah, they gave $50 billion last year to Democratic candidates who oppose school choice.
Wow.
And this is absolutely the
50 billion?
No, I'm sorry, 50 million.
Million, yeah, right.
And this is the school choice issue of our time, the civil rights issue of our time. So when we come back, we're going to talk about Trump fighting the courts. Good news is coming from Washington, D.C. On this week, the U.S. Supreme Court will hear oral arguments on the proposal by Trump that U.S. district courts not be permitted to issue nationwide injunctions, that their injunctions should only apply to their own local area. And this is basically to stop district court judges who are often very liberal and appointed by Obama and Biden from blocking the Trump agenda.
Well, that comes from the guy that stopped the plane. He wanted to turn the plane,
exactly,
around.
The same thing.
Where was he from? Dakota or something? I don't know. Where was
No, from New York, I think. I'm not sure. Anyway,
matter, yeah.
but the point is that you can't, shouldn't be allowed to do that. And the Supreme Court needs to clarify that and explain that. And I'm so happy now that there's a lawsuit that's going to be heard by the Supreme Court to stop that.
And did you say it's going to be heard this week?
I think this week.
Wow,
yeah.
That's great that they're pushing
right.
it.
They're pushing it very hard.
Beautiful.
And one of the freezes that we want to oppose here is the Trump proposed freeze in the Voice of America money in basically U.S. radio, which also includes NPR and public television. And Trump wanted to cut it, and the district court stopped him from doing it. The Supremes had a thought on that. Handed President Trump a massive win on Saturday after a district court judge had ordered him to rehire staff from the far-left Voice of America that will have impacts beyond just this one case, according to a legal expert. U.S. District Court Judge Royce Lamberth, a normally good Reagan appointee, said Voice of America is funded by Congress, and Trump's cut to the agency are a direct affront to the power of the legislative branch, and he granted a preliminary injunction stopping the cuts from taking place. Thanks to this ridiculous decision, Voice of America staffers were set to return to work next week, and the station was set to resume broadcasting. But an unexpected setback occurred this afternoon. The D.C. Court of Appeals entered a stay of Lambert's injunction, suspending the first instance decision, blocking the order that allowed them to return to work. The Court of Appeals decision is based on the fundamental issue of jurisdiction, she explained. This conclusion should have widespread ramifications because many challenges to Trump administration are about employment decisions which Congress said are not for district courts to decide.
Good.
This conclusion should have widespread ramifications because many of the challenges to the Trump administration are about employment decisions which Congress said are not for district courts to decide. So relief is coming here, and Trump will be able to move ahead with his budget cuts.
And now we got the mayor of Newark and the three Democratic congressmen storm ICE facility to free detainees, both arrested. Can you believe this? They stormed this thing. All right, what's this song here? And members of Congress from New Jersey stormed an ICE detention facility on Friday. Representative Rob Menendez Jr., Bonnie Watson Coleman, and LaMonica McCleaver, I don't know, and Newark Mayor Rash Barack were part of a broader group of protesters who rushed into the Delaney Hall Detention Center just as a bus of new detainees was entering the security gate, according to Homeland Security officials and local news. Miss Watson Coleman said on social media that she considered her action part of her oversight authority to inspect the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement facility. But the intrusion drew a rebuke from Homeland Security, which said the two members of Congress were holed up at a security checkpoint Friday afternoon. Members of Congress storming into the detention facility goes beyond bizarre political stunts and puts the safety of our law enforcement agents and detainees at risk. Members of Congress are not above the law and cannot illegally break into detention facilities, said Tricia McLaughlin, an assistant secretary to our boy Tom Holman, Homeland Security. She said the lawmakers should have requested a tour. She also disputed the claims that Delaney was not properly permitted.
Now, the Democrats have made the opposition to deportations the central point of their public rhetoric this year. And if you look at any of the news coverage and you say, what's the one point the Democrats are making? It is that we should stop the deportations, and that we should not be rounding up illegal immigrants, even with criminal records, and we should not be putting them on planes and making them go to other countries, usually their home country from whence they came.
Right.
How is the Democratic Party doing this?
How?
Don't they know that 80% of the American people, 90% want these folks deported?
It's unbelievable.
They want everybody who's here illegally to get deported, and particularly if you have a criminal record.
That's unbelievable, but not for nothing, Dick. Not for nothing. Really, double negative. Sandra from New Jersey just wants to talk about this right now. Sandra? Hi, Sandra.
Hi, Sandra.
Hi. I wanted to say, as I live, I learn. So when I learned there was this detention center right in Newark, I was kind of happy. I learned about it. It's a $1 billion detention center, and the GMO is the one who did the contract. The GEO did the contract. It has 1,000 beds. It also has a nice little drug part that they...
You sound like you're selling your condo.
Yeah, what are you selling over here, Sandra?
No,
you sound like you're urging people to move in.
Is there a piano there?
No.
What kind of view does it have?
It's important to know it's not such a bad place like they're painting it out to be. And I spoke to Jack Ciattarelli, and he said that mayor, Raz Baraka, he should be focusing on the schools, the failure of the schools, the devastation at the airports. He should be focusing on other things like the crime that's happening every day. Not this. This is a political act that he's pulling. So let me tell you, I pray that Jack Ciattarelli becomes our next governor, because none of this is going to go on anymore once he becomes governor.
I mean, the Democrats are absolutely standing up for murderers, rapists, kidnappers, and terrorists, and saying, do not detain them, keep them in our country. We want them to the building blocks of our nation.
Yeah.
And they're criminals who are one step ahead of the feds.
I mean, they have to live here, too. The Democrats, the people that want this to happen, they have to live here, too.
Yeah.
What's the story with that?
They have to live, the goal is for them not to have to live in Washington. Unbelievable.
Well, I don't know. Is it still about that one world order thing, no borders in the whole world?
Well, it's that, but it's also
together?
that they want the votes. They want someone who's deported can't vote Democrat, so they don't want people deported.
So they want votes so we could keep illegal people around, and murderers and rapists. They want those votes. Why do they want that vote?
And in New York, they also wanted, they tried, the court said no, to let them vote in local elections.
Yeah, right.
Even if they're here illegally.
And what court said no? The local,
state court,
right, the state. But that's unbelievable that they want that. Why don't they change the narrative, and why don't they figure out we want something else to happen to get Democrats voted back in? How can they can't change it up a little bit?
When we come back, we'll talk about the detention prisons Trump is opening for deportees. That's also so that the Democrats can invade them and get arrested.
Yeah, right. And thank you, Sandra. Thank you so much.
Welcome to the Dick Morris and Doug Depierro show.
And who sponsors this show,
For
Dick?
the Patriot Gold Group.
Jack Haney. You gotta
Yeah.
love that guy. Love him.
Good.
I'm thinking about getting silver.
Yeah.
I'm really, because silver's like 34, 35.
Yeah.
Jack said it's going to go up to like gold. I don't see how that's happening, but he thinks it's going to really go up. I think I'm buying it.
So let's talk to Alan, who I gather is an ICE agent.
Hey, Alan.
Called in. Hi, Alan.
Hi, Dick. How are you? I just wanted to let you know with what happened over at Delaney Hall there
Right.
in Newark. I want you to know that these facilities are among the cleanest, most well-run detention centers anywhere. Detainees mandatorily get medical care and evaluation on admission, and any issue they have gets followed up on. They're fed 3 squares a day. They're given clothing that changes every other day.
So how do I get in?
Yeah, right.
If you want to come in, you can certainly speak to the.
No, I mean, so I get the meals and everything.
Right. Can he steal something?
The problem, you know what they say, it's like you can get in, but you can't get out.
Yeah, right.
He's got to fly to Mexico and then go through the border.
Hotel California.
These are not inhumane facilities in any
Thank
stretch
you.
of the imagination.
You work for ICE?
Yes. And
Well, congratulations, and thank you for what you're doing to save America.
And thanks for calling in, Alan. Thank you so much.
We want to honor ICE agents.
I think he wants something else to say. You got something else, Alan?
I just wanted to tell you, if you compare an ICE detention center to the state facilities, to a state prison, there is no comparison. It's like going to the Marriott as opposed to staying at a, I don't know, like a Motel
hotel.
6.
Yeah.
Well, the nicest thing is that the place they stay after that is out of our country.
Because of our guy.
So, Doug, you were saying about new detention facilities. Thank you, Alan.
Yeah, and Trump is opening more detention prisons for the guys. The Trump administration has begun reopening, immigrant detention facilities and shuttered prisons nationwide. The latest move in its effort to arrest, detain, and then deport illegal immigrants in the United States. 2 prison corporations and the Federal Bureau of Prisons have moved quickly to prepare facilities to hold immigrants in virtually every region of the country. The move followed President Trump's recent comment over the weekend in which he called for the infamous Alcatraz prison off the San Francisco coast to be reopened to detain America's most ruthless and violent offenders. The Bird of Alcatraz, was that the movie with Clint Eastwood or whatever? Remember the guy that took off?
Mm.
The Department of Homeland Security has maintained that the expansion of immigrant detention space is necessary to carry out Trump's largest ever deportation operation. However, the operation is moving slower than anticipated due to lack of detention space where immigrants are held as they go through legal proceedings before they can be deported. All right, so he's going to open up Alcatraz. That's pretty cool.
Now, Trump has moved aggressively to stop illegal immigrants from being in the country and to get them deported. And every time he does that, the ACLU has one of their attorneys fight him in court. And the district courts, which hear these cases, are biased liberal courts with judges largely appointed by Obama and by Biden. So they have routinely held that Trump can't hold these people, that he can't deport them. He recently detained students who've challenged their deportation on the constitutional grounds of habeas corpus. Now, writ of habeas corpus is where the judge orders the authorities to produce the corpus, produce the body, produce the guy so that he can be released from prison. And Trump some people have suggested and that Trump is looking at this, that if the courts continue to permit these district court judges to expel people, to force Trump to retain people, to cancel the expulsions, that Trump will suspend the right of habeas corpus. Now, the Constitution says that the right of habeas corpus can be suspended in the event of war or insurrection. And it has only happened 3 times in our history. One was during the Civil War. And the courts aren't just at war with the executive branch. These radical rogue judges with the legislative branch as well are at war with the public.
With the Ku Klux Klan, the Civil War. That's what with that.
Right. But this will be highly controversial and hopefully unnecessary. During the Civil War, parts of South Carolina overrun by the Klan during Reconstruction, and in the Philippines and Hawaii after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Mm-hmm. We don't need to suspend habeas corpus. What we need to do is the court, which is hearing the case this week, needs to hold that these radical leftist district court judges cannot stop national policy. Nobody voted for them for president. They didn't run for president. They were appointed to district courts, and they do not control national policy. And their attempts to do so are illegal and will be reversed on appeal. But in the meantime, the people are not being deported. They're staying in the country. And we're giving hope to every illegal criminal who can stay so that they can stay in the United States.
Well, the Supreme Court looks at this. Will they set a precedent that they can't do that?
Yes.
That the district courts cannot do that?
Yes.
Okay. They're not just going to say you can't do it on this case.
Well, they have the option of doing that, but I hope they make it
set
the precedents around the country. This is so outrageous. It would be like one member of Congress passing a bill and saying, I'm the law, and the other 435 would have nothing to say about it.
Right.
This is just wrong. The Immigration Nationality Act, passed in 1965, takes away the judicial branch's jurisdiction over immigration cases and gives wide authority to the president to end temporary protective status and other policies, said Stephen Miller, the administration's spokesman on this. Courts aren't just at war with the executive branch. The courts are at war with these radical rogue judges with the legislative branch as well. So all of that will inform the choices the president ultimately makes. I hope that Trump does not have to do that, does not have to suspend habeas corpus, but it gives him an option that he's threatening. I think that will impact the Supreme Court in getting them to limit the power of district court judges.
Did you talk about when they're looking at this?
This week, I think.
This is also this week.
Right.
At least they're going forward.
Yeah.
They're not letting these things sit, because they let them sit. We don't know where these guys are going to end up.
Senator Kennedy of Louisiana has addressed his Democratic colleagues, declaring it akin to a chaotic game room in a mental hospital.
He's a piss of this guy.
This vivid imagery certainly grabs attention. The senator used it to highlight what he perceived as the Democratic Party's lack of coherent ideas. He described their contributions as little more than rabbit barking. He accused them of being defined by their consistent opposition.
Not rabbit barking, rabid barking. Like
I'm
sorry.
Okay.
A dog with rabies.
Why rabbit? Okay, rabbit.
He's a funny guy, by the way, this guy.
I accused them of being defined by their constant opposition to Trump rather than presenting constructive alternatives. Trump derangement syndrome, CDS. This striking claim suggests that the Democrats are guided more by their disdain for Trump than by solid principles or policies. As the conversation shifted, the senator turned his attention to the current Democratic leadership, singling out figures like AOC and Bernie Sanders. He said AOC is the true leader of the Democratic Party, dismissing others' influence. He said it not only reflects the deep partisan divide, but also suggests that the senator views these progressive figures as emblematic of a broader issue within the party, the embrace of ideas he considers reckless or out of touch with mainstream America.
Overall, the senator's assessment of the President Trump's first 100 days and his scathing review of the Democratic Party are indicative of the current political landscape. In a climate rife with the division, narratives like this one are likely to resonate with Republican supporters who are eager to see the party's agenda thrive. With humor laced throughout serious points, the senator's comments serves as a rallying cry for conservatives, galvanizing them as they look towards the future.
Trump derangement syndrome.
Yeah, he is a funny guy.
When we come back, we're going to talk about socialism throughout the world and in New York City. Welcome to the Dick Morris and Doug Depierro Show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group.
Hi, Dick.
We have an election for mayor coming up this year, with the primary in June and the general election in November. And there is a candidate, obviously Andrew Cuomo is running for mayor, and he's the front runner right now in the Democratic primary. But in second place is a socialist mayoral candidate, Zohran Mamdani. Zohran is his first name, Mamdni is his second name.
Mamdani.
And he's an immigrant from Uganda, and his father is a very famous, very leftist professor in New York, and he is the candidate of the Socialist Party, trying to take over the Democratic Party in New York. This is emblematic of the thing I've been talking about for months now, which is that when after a defeat, the Democratic Party always moves to the left.
Right.
And this is their new standard bearer, Mamdani. He is pushing for a rent freeze, have the city take over grocery stores and operate them, and free child care.
Because they run things so beautifully, the city.
The rents in New York are set by three systems. It's free market rents, which are the luxury buildings, rent control that was passed in 1947. My father was one of the architects of it and one of the biggest opponents of it later. And then rent stabilization, which was on newer buildings and is the dominant form of rent control.
Let me ask you a question, Dick. When, not to get off too much, but rent control building, does the city or the state now subsidize the guy that owns that building?
No.
How can he pay for that building?
He can't. And very often he abandons the building.
And then what do?
Then they have to take it over and it becomes a parking lot. So the Rent Stabilization Board, which my father used to sit on, has proposed 7.5% rent hikes in New York. And the socialist candidate, Zohran Mamdani, is campaigning on a promise to immediately freeze the rent for these tenants. Of all the enticing campaign promises socialists make during an election, this is one of the easiest to implement, since the mayor appoints the rent board and can pick members who will implement his agenda. Just as Mayor Eric Adams has consistently chosen members who side with landlords, Mayor Mamdani could appoint a pro-tenant board that would freeze rents, which is what Blasio did. It is an insult to the city's working people that our real estate elites feel entitled in the middle of a crippling affordability crisis, he said, to further squeeze 1 million tenants living in rent-stabilized buildings. That's part of the reason why Mamdani's campaign has now so much momentum. Now, Mamdani does not address the other question, which is how the hell you get people to build housing when they can't rent it for decent market rates.
Right. They can't pay for the build it.
How would you like to put your head in a noose and jump off a platform? And nobody considers the idea that if you're going to freeze rents, you're going to so limit the supply of housing, because nobody's going to build housing because you can't rent it for a decent amount, and it increases homelessness and causes shortage of housing that itself causes rent increases in the first place. But
nobody seems to understand that. Is that
well?
What it
These
is?
leftist politicians do, and they don't give a damn. They're basically communists.
Like you said, they just want to get voted in.
Yeah, and Mamdani is also proposing universal child care for New Yorkers and improving the wages for child care workers by expanding current funding programs. That basically will mean warehousing children. It'll mean that you extend the public education monopoly to pre-K, and it becomes a babysitting operation. He's also tackling a problem most politicians avoid, the cost of groceries. He wants to set up municipal grocery stores. That's grocery stores owned by the city.
Oh, my God.
Because they do such a wonderful job. Yeah. And that presupposes that the reason grocery prices are high is nothing to do with farms, nothing to do with middlemen.
Right.
But it's all about greedy bodega owners.
Yeah, of course.
Latching on extra prices.
Oh, you can't say greedy bodegas, greedy white owners.
He also is proposing to raise the minimum wage to $30 an hour by 2030, starting at $20 an hour in 27, and raise the floor every year after 2030. This is basically a communist takeover of New York City, and would destroy what's left of New York. It would drive the middle class out of the city. It would stop all housing construction. It would cut back on the number of stores available for people, and cut back on the supply of food and other necessities.
You know, when you say it like that, Dick, it's hard to get happy with the story. And you're right. The way you say it, what it's going to do.
And this guy is getting about 20% of the vote in the Democratic primary. Cuomo is getting about 45%, but Mamdani is in second place.
Wow. And AOC has supported him, right?
She hasn't endorsed him yet, but she probably will. And he is likely to be in a runoff with Cuomo, and he'll get killed, but the program itself will live after him. And he's an assemblyman now from Queens, and he's proposing these changes that will absolutely destroy New York City.
You know what? I still like Curtis. It's going to be rough for him to get it, but he could do it. I don't know. I'm just going to keep supporting him.
Curtis Lee will be the Republican candidate for mayor, who will run against the winner of the Cuomo-Mamdani primary, which will be Cuomo. And
you think Cuomo's going to toast Mamdani?
Yeah, I think Cuomo will defeat him. I think Mamdani is God's gift to Cuomo because it means that Cuomo is going to win the primary.
But now Adams is still in, right, as a third party?
Third party.
He's in still, okay.
But the point is that a lot of voters were inclined to vote against Cuomo because he killed 7,000 people
sure.
in nursing homes by putting COVID patients right in the middle of nursing homes where vulnerable people could get the disease.
Right.
And they're mad at him from when he was governor. But now they can't vote for him because if they do, you can't vote against him because if they do, Mamdani is going to win.
So what about Curtis? How about they vote for Curtis?
Yeah, well, that's a real option.
He's a tough guy. He'll straighten out the city.
That's a real option. Curtis would be a great mayor.
He's got a lot of balls. He's just like Rudy Giuliani. Well, nobody's like Rudy Giuliani, so I'm just going to back up right there. But he's tough like that. He's going to say, no, you can't do it. You got to do it. Just like a Trump, like a Rudy. Curtis will be tough on New York, and we'll love it. We'll walk through the streets, and it'll be safe.
So it is incredible that this guy is so serious that he's now the runner-up for mayor of New York, the absolute end of New York as a city.
Oh, my
unbelievable.
God.
Now, there is a report out.
Speaking of socialism.
Yeah, that tells you what percentage of the economy of Western countries is controlled by the government. We speak of socialism as a political term, sometimes an accusation, but in fact it's a statistic. What percent of the GDP of a country is controlled by government spending? And when it becomes 100, that's complete socialism, and as it approaches 100, it's more and more socialist.
Has there ever been 100%?
Well, yeah, under Soviet Union it was 100.
Yeah, okay, right.
By definition. In France, it's 57% now. In Germany, 49. In Britain, 45. In Japan, 41. And the U.S., 38. So that gives you a measure of how close to
38.
Socialism we are. 38.
38. That's a lot.
It's a lot, but includes defense spending and a lot of stuff.
Oh,
but,
that's how. Oh, okay.
But it's interesting how France has gone basically completely socialist, and Germany is in the process of doing that. But I think that's a perspective, as we see now Mamdani trying to make New York socialist.
Do you think there's any possibility of that guy
winning?
Yeah.
No, I don't think there's a chance that he'll win. But I think there's a good chance that he'll throw the primary to Cuomo. And he's getting 20+% of the vote. And guys like that, when they run, inject ideas into politics that move everybody to the left. And I think that Mamdani and AOC and Bernie Sanders are the key figures to watch in moving the Democratic Party.
You know, you spell her name wrong. It's not AOC, it's AOC.
AOC, okay, good. Meantime, our economy is doing great. The stocks have regained nearly all of the early losses that we had when people got freaked about Trump's tariffs. Stocks have erased nearly all of April's losses, in part due to strong jobs reports. At Friday's close, the S&P 500 has notched its biggest winning streak since 2004.
Yeah, so major foreign car firms relocate to the U.S. after tariffs. I love this. And we got a good song for this. Has piqued the attention of international automakers, with foreign car makers shifting more manufacturing to the United States, particularly with electric and hybrid models. I got to tell you, bringing their electric models is a little bit of a hedge for them, because if they don't work out, you know, they're saving money coming into America, and they bring the electric, you know, they're going to be there. There's going to be 10%, 50% electric cars forever, but it's not going to be like the mandate Biden wanted. Anyway, this week it was reported that the second largest automaker in the world, the Volkswagen Group, and its luxury brand Audi are now planning to make some of its crossover SUVs and electric models in America. That translates into jobs, industry analysis, guy says, right? Currently, most of Audi's lineup is assembled in Germany, Hungary, Mexico, Slovakia, Spain, and China. But a company spokesperson told the Daily Mail this week, "We want to localize more strongly in the USA. To this end, we are currently examining various scenarios. We're confident that we will make a decision on this in consultation with the Volkswagen Group before the end of this year as to what this will look like in concrete terms." President Trump has argued his 25% tariff will revive American manufacturing after decades of decline. Vehicles manufactured in the U.S. will have a clear price advantage.
So everybody raised hell when Trump proposed his tariffs, and the stock market went crazy down. But now it's recovered its gain, and we're seeing how manufacturing firms are, in fact, moving back to the United States. There was a statistic published last week that U.S. consumer confidence was down. But this week a statistic came out that explains that that's simply a reflection of political party. Consumer confidence among Republicans is 86%, and among Democrats it's 27%.
Amazing.
So whether you're confident in the economy or not depends mainly on what political party you're from.
Well, they're not confident in Trump. That's their problem, and we are.
Yep.
We see what. Plus, it's happening. A lot of stuff's already happening. Look at these guys coming here. I think we got to go, Dick.
Oh, do we?
I'm not sure.
No, I think we're.
I don't think
Lux.
so. Lux, we got a break.
Sorry.
Break a leg.
Welcome back to the Dick Morris and Doug Depierro show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. During the election, Kamala Harris drove the left crazy by saying that Donald Trump would end abortion, and women all over the country became energized by that. Well, today we have something novel happening in America that shows how wrong they were. The Justice Department has backed the abortion pill in a lawsuit. The lawsuit to make the abortion pill illegal was being argued in the courts, and the Justice Department intervened on the pro-choice side of that debate, backing the abortion pill. The Rolling Stones have a comment about that. I don't know. I assume one of the pro-life groups.
Obviously, yeah.
But it is so important. During the campaign, Trump went out of his way to assure people that he was letting the states make the decision about abortion, and he would not take it out of the states' hands and would not let the federal government impose a ban on abortion. And now he's keeping his promise in a major way. Intervening in this lawsuit would have been unthinkable before, and yet now it's happening. Good for you, Donald Trump.
Politically it was great, but it was great for people that, you're in a state and you vote whether you're going to do it or not, or, how you're going to lay down the law for that. It was just brilliant.
Yep. Okay.
So Hegseth proposes major cuts in the military brass. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth on Monday directed significant cuts to U.S. military's senior-most ranks, saying the elimination of positions held by about 100 generals and admirals is necessary to slash redundant force structure, he calls it, and streamline the Pentagon's sprawling bureaucracy. The plan was announced with scant detail in a one-page memo signed by the defense secretary. It calls for a minimum 20% cut to the number of four-star generals and admirals, the military's top rank, on active duty, and corresponding numbers of generals in the National Guard. There also will be another 10% reduction, at least, to the total number of generals and admirals across the force. It was unclear whether Hegseth intends to gradually phase out the targeted positions, which his memo does not identify or move quickly to force out the men and women who now fill those roles. Officials on Hegseth's staff said staff did not respond to questions about how quickly they may adopt the cuts, in keeping with the Pentagon's recent effort to limit communication with the public news media.
Well, that's going on. Robert Kennedy is moving very quickly to make our food safer and curb childhood diseases. The Department of Health and Human Services had reached an understanding with powerful food industry, and said Kennedy, to voluntarily remove 6 synthetic dyes by the end of 26. In addition to his announcement on food dyes, he directed the Food and Drug Administration to explore tightening a loophole that has been allowing food companies to put chemicals in their products without notifying the nation's food regulators. He ordered a review of baby formula ingredients, as he recently declared that sugar is poison. Kennedy is using his bully pulpit to publicly deride the ingredients in food, as he aims for companies to voluntarily rid their products of food dyes, which some studies have associated with hyperactivity and behavior effects in children.
But it looks good.
The Washington Post contacted more than 10 major food companies. Some said they plan to take action or have already been removing synthetic dyes from food, while others noted that it was under consideration. General Mills said the vast majority of its products do not contain artificial colors, while adding that the company is committed to continuing the conversation. Kellogg, the U.S. cereal business, is said to reformulating its cereals to ensure that those served in schools are dye-free, and will work with the administration to identify ways to effectively remove these dyes.
They're not removing the dyes. They're not putting them in anymore.
Yeah, right, exactly.
They're not removing them.
You're exactly
Don't put them
right.
in.
Kennedy is now. The other thing that Kennedy is doing is working with the Department of Agriculture to argue that federal dollars should not go toward purchasing food stamp products that are major drivers of poor health and obesity. They face fierce resistance from the beverage industry, which is lobbying against the moves. Kennedy wants to stop overly sugary drinks and soft drinks from being covered under food stamps. If you want to make the kid obese and you want to give him a terrible life, do it on your own.
Yeah, right.
Don't ask for a subsidy. 4 Republican states have formally asked for the federal government's permission to bar the use of food stamps to buy soda, and some instances candy as well. Secretary of Agriculture Rollins indicated that her department will move quickly to greenlight the state efforts, even traveling to Arkansas to tout the state's plan. Meanwhile, at least 5 states have passed legislation cracking down on food dyes and other additives from being used in school lunches or restricting the sale of products containing such ingredients in their states.
God bless.
Opponents, the opponents have argued that the food dye industry sees the handwriting on the wall, and they are withdrawing these food dyes. So Kennedy is having a wonderful effect in his plan for what he calls MAHA, M-A-H-A, Make America Healthy Again.
You know, you go over a friend's house, and the mother makes all beautiful food with vegetables and fresh, and you want sugar stuff, and she doesn't have soda. She has, water and lemonade made without the sugar. That's what you eat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The government's giving you the money to feed your children. They're going to tell you what you're going to eat, right?
Now, one of the big things that just happened is Trump has halted gain-of-function funding around the world. On Monday, he ordered new limits on gain-of-function research his administration says caused the COVID-19 pandemic through a lab leak in China. The U.S. will halt funding in certain countries for so-called gain-of-function experiments aimed at enhancing the properties of pathogens, according to executive order Trump signed Monday at the White House. Kennedy said there is no lab that's immune from leaks, and this is going to prevent inadvertent leaks from happening in the future and endangering humanity. Any nation that engages in this research endangers their own population as well as the world, as we saw during the COVID epidemic. Trump has long passioned the theory that the virus leaks from the Wuhan Institute of Virology as the result of gain-of-function research, the alternative to the crazy theory the Chinese have us believe that some bat bite caused this.
Yeah.
During the 2010s, the National Institutes of Health funded bat coronavirus research at the Wuhan Institute via the U.S.-based nonprofit EcoHealth, a grant axed by Trump in 2020 during his first term, but later partially restored by Biden. Kennedy told Newsmax that Trump's executive order was a milestone and historic development. Gain-of-function is an area where scientists really play God, Kennedy said. They're taking pathogenic viruses, and they're making them more transmissible, they're making them more virulent, and they're making them more deadly. President Trump wants to have our federally funded scientists actually improving federal health, ending chronic disease, fighting infectious diseases, rather than creating new ones. And yesterday, Trump signed an executive order to ban dangerous gain-of-function studies in this country and prevent us from funding those studies abroad. I think it was a milestone, Kennedy said, historic development. I'm grateful to President Trump for doing it. Kennedy said gain-of-function studies resulted after the U.S. began biological weapons research in 1947, but that President Nixon ended it in 1969. Nixon then ordered the U.S. to destroy its entire stockpile of biological agents and restrict future biological research programs to defensive measures such as vaccines and field detectors. Nixon also led the charge for a UN-crafted biological weapons convention treaty, which the Senate ratified in 72 and 187 nations have signed. But Kennedy blamed Dr. Anthony Fauci, former head of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, for reviving gain-of-function research in 2001, following a series of anthrax attacks in the U.S. Although the Obama administration paused federal funding in October of 2014, the National Institute of Health lifted that pause in 2017 and allowed experiments involving the SARS virus. A lab leak at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which was studying gain-of-function of coronavirus, is believed to be what sparked the pandemic. Gain-of-function studies in bioweapons development was forbidden by the Bioweapons Charter, Kennedy said. Nixon did something really extraordinary. He went to Fort Detrick in Maryland in 1969 and said, "We're unilaterally stopping all bioweapons development." And then he got 180 nations to sign on. When Anthony Fauci began launching these studies again in 2001, after the anthrax attacks, it precipitated an entire bioweapons arms race across the globe, and the Chinese are now deep into it. Russia's deep into it, Iran and many other countries. Kennedy said Henry Kissinger, National Security Advisor under Nixon, described such research as the poor man's atomic bomb.
Atom bomb, yeah. Right.
Kennedy said anybody can make this stuff, particularly now with AI technology and CRISPR technology. They can make it in their garage if they have the blueprint.
Wow.
All these scientists, the federally funded scientists, were creating the blueprint and then publishing them. And they were just how-to manuals about how to destroy humanity.
Why would they publish it?
It's really insane what we were doing. And Kennedy said, I'm very, very grateful for President Trump for putting an end to it in this country. And we're looking forward to his leadership around the world and getting other countries also to ban it.
Now, why wouldn't the Dems like that?
God knows.
You know, why
God
would
knows.
they say, I don't like the guy, but look what he's doing. This is important.
Well, the argument that the liberals make is we need to produce the stuff in order to figure out how to kill it.
Boolah.
And that we can't do a vaccine unless we know what we're vaccinating against, so we need to do that.
Right.
Which is the kind of theory that results in Frankenstein destroying the world.
Right.
And it caused 6 million deaths from COVID around the world and 1 million in the United States.
So let's burn a whole city so we could figure out how to put the fire out.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
Now, Governor DeSantis in Florida was originally promoting the idea that his wife, Casey, could run for the Senate vacancy created by Rubio becoming Secretary of State. But since then, her candidacy has been killed because it came out DeSantis got $10 million from a Medicaid provider and gave it to a PAC pushing his political agenda, opposing marijuana legalization. And he literally took the money literally away from the Medicaid program and put it into a PAC to kill this expansion of marijuana legalization.
Wow, and I like the guy.
Ultimately, it worked and the bill was killed, but they shouldn't have done that.
No.
And he effectively made it impossible for his wife to run. Now, reminiscent of stuff that happened during the 60s, there were massive demonstrations at Columbia. And Columbia called the cops as students occupied the library. But now it's different because Rubio is going to investigate and possibly pull their visas.
You want me to go? Trump officials vowed Thursday to review the visa statuses of 80 pro-Palestinian protesters taken into custody during a takeover of Columbia's University Library. We are reviewing the visa status of the trespassers and vandals who took over Columbia University's library, U.S. Secretary Rubio said. Acting Columbia University President Claire Shipman authorized the NYPD to enter campus after the swarm of mass protesters showed up in the library. Cops were seen escorting out dozens of protesters in zip ties whose officials said were not enrolled in the school and were trespassing. Claire Shipman attributed the decision to allow the police officers, NYPD officers on campus, to a large number of protesters. 2 Columbia security officers were injured as protesters forced their way inside the building. Requesting the presence of the NYPD is not the outcome we wanted, but it is what absolutely was necessary to secure the safety of our community, Shipman wrote. Disruptions to our academic activities will not be tolerated and are violations of our rules and policies. This is especially acceptable while our students study and prepare for finals. Videos on social media show the activists who wore masks pushing through security at the entrance of the Butler, the main campus, shortly after 3 p.m. The protesters played drums and posted signs and stickers to free Mahmoud Khalid, a recent Columbia grad who had been detained by federal immigration authorities.
Good for her.
Good for her.
Finally, the university is standing up against the racists and radicals and anti-Semites who wanted to take over the campus.
And some weren't even students, they said.
And good for you, Trump, for cutting off their funding to make them do it. And good for you, Rubio, for throwing these guys out of the United States.
And checking their visas and whatnot. It's awesome.
When we come back, we will talk about Trump's new drug price reforms that he was so euphoric about describing to me over the phone yesterday. Welcome to the Dick Morris and Doug Depierro Show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group. The average price disparity for a selection of 10 high-cost Medicare drugs show U.S. prices are 2.8 times higher than in 11 comparable countries, including Australia, Canada, France, Germany, and Japan. Wow. 3 times higher. So we're paying 3 times more for the same meds that the rest of the world does.
Is that because some of these other countries follow our research and development? Like we pay for our research and development.
Yeah, we pay for it and they get it for
free. And then
free.
They get it, right.
Right.
That's how they're doing. They don't
now,
have to
Trump
pay
will announce a plan to lower U.S. prescription drug costs by tying the amount the government pays for some meds to prices paid abroad, a strategy he pursued unsuccessfully in his first term. Trump is expected to sign an executive order early next week that will instruct federal health officials to adopt a most favored nation pricing model for certain drugs covered by Medicare, meaning that the U.S. would pay no more than the lowest prices paid by other wealthy countries. Trump explained this to me over the phone yesterday, and he was euphoric about it. He said, have you read what I'm going to do on drug pricing? He said, this will be a gigantic cut in drug prices. And I said, well, that is fantastic, but make sure the Congressional Budget Office scores this proposal and says you don't have to raise taxes and you don't have to cut Medicaid. This cut in prices will do it, because they haven't done it yet. And he said, that is a question I'm going to ask in a few hours at the meeting. And I think you'll see the effects of that in the next few days. Meantime, poor Mike Lawler.
I like Mike.
We loved him. We had him on. And
loved, we're past tense. We still love him.
We love him. But Trump has completely killed his ambition to become governor of New York. Let's hear the song.
Though we gotta say goodbye for the summer, darling, I promise you this, I'll send you all my love every day in a letter.
First of all, he didn't kill it. He
killed
go on,
it.
tell a story, but
Trump,
I'm not going to go with he killed it.
Trump announced that he was endorsing Mike Lawler because he's wonderful, he's great, he's terrific, but endorsing him for re-election to Congress. And the effect of that was telling him, don't run for governor.
because of the seat. It would be open.
Because you vacate the seat, and the seat might go Democrat. And anyhow, I like the other candidate for governor.
Stefanik.
It's Stefanik.
But hold on.
Who I appointed ambassador to the UN.
Yes, you did.
He didn't endorse Stefanik. He didn't disendorse Lawler.
Right.
But the smooth political move is he issued a pro-Lawler statement. This guy is wonderful in Congress.
But let me say this. Mike Lawler is a real stand-up guy, I'm telling you. He will stay in that seat if he thinks that could happen.
Yeah.
Once the seat's vacated.
Well,
right?
Now he's going to have to.
Well, he doesn't have to do anything, but he will because he's
it was a very smooth
guy.
move, a Washington move, a pro move by Donald Trump.
I like him.
You tell a guy that he can't run for the higher office by endorsing him for the lower office. What'd you say?
Yeah, what'd you say, Lux? Okay.
Okay. In Germany, there's a party called AFG, which is an alternative for Germany, and the German spy agency says that it's an extremist and Nazi organization, and wants to make it illegal. And there's a real controversy over this. Is the German government going overboard and just opposing this party because it wants to limit the power of the European Union, or is it genuinely a threat to bring Nazism back to the world? This will be an ongoing debate. While that's happening, the New York State Legislature just ruled that it was okay that the state taxpayers had to pay.
They're going to be
for
liable.
Letitia James charges.
All right, Tish. Taxpayers could be on the hook for New York Attorney General Letitia James legal bills. Imagine that during the Justice Department probes into her alleged fraudulent real estate dealings. Albany Democrats are expected to sign off on a provision allowing certain officials to tap into a $10 million fund to cover any reasonable attorney fees and expenses incurred, even as a part of probes not directly related to their state employment, really. The language is being slipped into New York's operations budget bill, one of 7 expected to be made public and voted on starting Wednesday as the legislature moves to pass the New Year's fiscal plan. Multiple sources told the Post that specific language in the bill would apply to James' looming legal fight. The New York Republican State Committee Chairman Cox quickly lashed out over the move to slip a legal bailout to James, calling it an outrageous abuse of power and a slap in the face to every New Yorker. This is what corruption looks like in plain sight. Political insiders rigging the system to protect their own, while hardworking families get shortchanged.
It's important to remember what Letitia James did. Tish, yeah. Letitia James, who brought the prosecution against Donald Trump for mortgage fraud, committed this egregious mortgage fraud herself. She listed her father as her husband on her forms.
Maybe they were a little close.
So that his income would be used to assess her credit worthiness for mortgages. So she beefed up the perception of her income. And Donald Trump was indicted really, for increasing the value of his property, so he appeared more creditworthy. The difference is that Trump did it with the permission of the banks. There was no ill consequence to it. He paid it back with interest,
right.
And Tish James just pocketed the difference.
And the Federal Housing Finance Agency Director, William Pult, sent a letter to Pam Bondi asking her to investigate and consider prosecuting James, alleging she falsified bank documents. I'm going to love to see that happen.
Also, you can't be Attorney General of New York if you don't live in New York.
Yeah, was it Virginia or something?
And this document said, I'm moving to Virginia. So if she's going to do that, she has to give up her post in New York.
And she also said that it was a 2-family, not a 4-family, something to that effect. I don't have those numbers exact. But so that she would pay less in whatever.
Yeah. She said a 4-family as opposed to a 5-family
Something
house.
like that, right.
Which lowered her property taxes.
Right.
So she's committing mortgage fraud, and she's indicting a candidate for president for mortgage fraud, which was not fraud, but what she's doing was fraud.
But how much a moron is she that didn't she say, wait a minute, maybe I'm not going to take this case because I kind of dig this thing over here?
I want to interrupt this show to announce that Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has reported tremendous progress made in the U.S.-Chinese negotiations over the tariff going on right now in Saudi Arabia. And they haven't announced the details yet. They will be announced on Monday. But it looks like Trump has secured a key breakthrough in this.
Oh, that's unbelievable.
The U.S. raised tariffs on China to $145 billion and 145%. And China retaliated by raising tariffs on us to 125%. And Trump has now said 80% sounds like a good figure, and there's some speculation it'll come down to 60 to 80%. Now, let's say it's 60%. China sells us $500 billion a year of products and services. So a tariff of 60% would be $300 billion of savings that could then be used to balance the budget.
That's some jack.
And to eliminate the need for a tax increase or the need for cuts in any major cash transfer programs like Medicaid. This is a gigantic development, and it vindicates Trump's strategy and vindicates his toughness and aggressiveness in taking on China.
I want to hear what the Democrats say. Oh, look what he did. He hates.
What they can say
I
is,
hate Chinese food or whatever.
They can say this is a tax increase on Americans because Americans will have to pay for this tariff at the checkout counter if they buy Chinese products.
Don't buy them.
But if they don't buy Chinese products, they don't got to pay nothing. And increasingly, it's going to make sure that manufacturers make their products in the United States so they're not subject to the tariff. And it's going to create jobs, and it's also going to hold down prices. Yeah. When we come back, we will talk about John Fetterman, the senator from Pennsylvania, who is accused of being crazy.
He's a little bit off, but he's cool. All right, when we get back.
Welcome to the Dick Morris and Doug Depierro Show, sponsored by the Patriot Gold Group.
So Fetterman.
A listener just called in and said that Mandami, the communist running for mayor, is being funded by George Soros. So let's follow that story in the future, and thank you for that tip.
Next, Judith. Thank you, Judith. All right. John Fetterman and his mental health. Democratic Senator Fetterman of Pennsylvania was meeting last week with representatives from teachers unions in his home state, where things quickly devolved. Before long, Fetterman began repeating himself, shouting and questioning why everyone is mad at me. Why does everyone hate me? What did I ever do? And slamming his hands on the desk, according to one person who was briefed on what occurred. As the meeting deteriorated, a staff member moved to end it and ushered the visitors into the hallway where she broke down crying. The staffer was comforted by the teachers who were themselves rattled by Fetterman's behavior, according to a second person who was briefed separately on the meeting. The interaction at Fetterman's Washington office, described to the Associated Press by two people who spoke about it on the condition of anonymity, came the day before New York Magazine published a story in which former staff and political advisor to Fetterman aired concern about the senator's mental health.
Now, the Democrats the Republicans rallied to Fetterman's defense. And Representative Richie Torres, a Democrat of New York, said, I know a hit piece when I see one. Mm-hmm. He said the only reason for the coordinated campaign against Fetterman is his unapologetic pro-Israel politics. Let's call it for what it is. As someone who's struggled with depression my whole adult life, I can tell you that if you truly care about someone's mental health, licking hit pieces against them is a strange way of showing them. On Friday, Senator David McCormick, who ran for Senate, was elected as a Republican in Pennsylvania, stuck up for Fetterman, saying in a statement that it's time to put politics aside and stop these vicious personal attacks against Senator Fetterman, his wife, and his mental health. We have many differences. We are both committed to working together to achieve results for the people of Pennsylvania and make their lives better, McCormick wrote. Wow, this is a Democratic hit on a Democratic senator designed to knock him out, and the Republican senators are crossing the aisle to defend him because it was a hit below the belt. Wow, this is historic. The Russians seem to be preparing for a big retreat in Ukraine. We don't know this, but they are evacuating staff from Luhansk and closing down the internet. There've been immense queues at border crossings to Russia for a week now. They're offering collaborators in Donetsk huge sums to stay put. They are evacuating their families from Crimea, Russians are, and selling whatever property they bought there. In those areas, also in occupied areas, in the Kherson Oblast, soldiers are looting motorcycles and other vehicles.
Motorcycles?
Yep. Russians obviously don't think they'll be able to hold on to the occupied territories. This is while Trump's negotiations that he's mediating between Russia and China are proceeding.
Great.
Now, the assumption had been that Russia was winning that war and Ukraine was losing it. And it just looked like a matter of time until Ukraine had to fold. And now there are reports that the Russian army is retreating and that there are reports of panic in the Russian-held territories that they may soon be lost to Ukraine.
Hey, Dick.
Don't know if this is true or not, but it's worth reporting.
Did you hear about Judge Janine? How great is this, huh?
Absolutely.
Depierro
wonderful.
named to head the largest U.S. attorney office. In a surprise post to the Truth Social Thursday afternoon, Trump announced his appointment of Judge Janine Pirro, who I love, as interim United States Attorney for District of Columbia. An acclaimed Fox News personality and co-host of The Five.
And a WABC personality.
Oh, I love her. I really do. And she loves motorcycles. She used to. I used to see her all the time. And The Five, Pirro held roles as an assistant district attorney in Westchester, where we're from, and county judge and district attorney. She's going to be great. You ever listen to her on The Five? She's so friggin' tough.
She was my client when she was going to run against
And
Hillary.
you know what I like about her? She got a mouth.
Yeah, she does.
She knows how to say, shut up. I love her.
I'm skipping 29 for 30. This is an interesting story. They did a survey in Germany, France, and Italy and Spain. And they asked people, do you believe America's dropping the atomic bomb on Japan during World War II was morally justified? And 80% of the Europeans said no, it was not morally justified. 30% of Americans said the same. But the Europeans are condemning the dropping of the atomic bomb.
Why are they even bringing that up now?
Well,
first of all, Japan was killing our soldiers, and what did they estimate we saved?
I'm glad they brought it up because we need to explain to people why it was important for us to drop that bomb. Americans feel more comfortable with justifying the tax. After all, it was American lives, hundreds of thousands of
that
them,
were saved,
which were on the line in the final days of the war. This isn't an abstract cost-benefit analysis.
Right.
The U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs estimated that there were a little more than 66,000 living World War II veterans in the U.S. today. These fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers might have perished in an invasion of Japan. I would not be here today because my father, who was in the Army, would have been drafted and might well have been killed. He was drafted, he was in the Army, but he might well have been killed.
As a matter of fact, a lot of people that are against it, say it's not, they might not even be here.
In anticipation of the casualties of Operation Downfall, the code name for our invasion of Japan that never was necessary, the U.S. has increased the production of Purple Hearts back then. Apparently 1.5 million Purple Hearts were minted in total. The reserve of decorations numbered almost 500,000.
How about say it again? 1.5 million
Purple Hearts.
That's wounded. Purple Heart wounded.
Military planners ultimately came to the conclusion that casualties on the low end would be somewhere around 250,000, at the upper end in the million range, if we were to invade Japan. So there should be no doubt about the moral consequences of dropping the bomb on Japan. It was one of the most moral things we could do. And listen, who started this war? We didn't start.
Yeah, right. That's right.
You know, years ago I visited Hiroshima, and I went to the monument where the bomb's center was, and the sign said, "This is how World War II started." It was in Japan, in Hiroshima, and it said Japan became embroiled in a war with the United States. Okay, guys. What? How do we come embroiled? There's a little thing called Pearl Harbor.
Yeah, right.
But they didn't want to mention that in Japan.
Why even bring this up now? I don't get it.
I think that it's important that kids understand that it was not immoral for the United States to do it. It was one of the most moral things we've ever done. We needed to do it, and thank God we did it. Look at all the lives we saved, Japanese lives and American lives.
Dick Morris, it's an honor to be here with you.
Yep,
thank
great
you very much,
you.
everyone, and happy Mother's Day to the beautiful. Hi, Gloria, my mother, Gloria Depierro. Yeah. Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
No. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
No.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hello, folks. Larry Kudlow here. Pay attention, because China is leading the largest anti-American alliance since World War II. One that's already dumped U.S. bonds, grabbed 43 million acres of our farmland, and is plotting to dethrone the dollar. That's why IRA and 401k savers are protecting their savings with gold. Please go to freegoldguide.com/Kudlow or just call 800-621-3908 for your free gold guide on how to protect your wealth with gold 100% tax-free.